morning, everyone, and welcome to the 5th series of the Community Health Endowment of Lincoln's Community Conversations. This is the second event in this series, and there are 2 more coming up. I'm Marcia White, the Program Manager for the Community Health Endowment, and I'm pleased to welcome you here today. I do want you to mark your calendars for our next 2 events. On April 5th at 2 p.m., in collaboration with Bryan Health, we'll have a session on Stop the Bleed. The recent shooting in Parkland, Florida is a sad reminder that all of us need to have the knowledge and skills to respond in an emergency situation. No matter how fast first responders can get there, bystanders will always be first on the scene. Stop the Bleed is a national program designed to train, equip, and empower bystanders to help in a bleeding emergency before professional help arrives. The conversation will include emergency room care providers, first responders, and local radio personality Dale Johnson, who survived a motorcycle crash because a bystander was there to apply a tourniquet. So that's April 5th at 2 p.m. And I believe that's a Thursday. On Wednesday, May 9th at 2 p.m., we're very excited to present a session, Solving Poverty, the 2-Gen Approach. Nearly 10,000 people in nearly 10,000 children in Lincoln live in poverty. And a 2016 report on intergenerational poverty from the Nebraska legislature said, the simple fact is, if you want to make tomorrow better for children, you have to make today better for parents and children. But existing programs often consider children and their parents separately. These fragmented approaches leave either the child or the parent behind. Addressing the needs of children and their parents together through a 2-gen approach puts the entire family on a path to economic security. Our May conversation will feature Janae Bradford, Assistant Director of Family Advancement Services for CAP Tulsa in Tulsa, Oklahoma. In 2009, CAP Tulsa stopped thinking of themselves as only an early childhood provider and started taking a 2-gen approach to all their programming with some amazing results for families. We're excited to bring Janae, who is a native of Omaha, back to Nebraska to share the CAP Tulsa story. So that's Wednesday, May 9th at 2 p.m. But now for today's conversation and the reason that you're all here. Postpartum depression affects millions of women each year and thousands of women in Lincoln alone. It can be frightening and confusing and seriously affect the mother's ability to care for her child and affect the family as well. We have a panel today that includes experts, care providers, and people who have lived through postpartum depression, and we're grateful to each of you for being willing to share your story today. It's my pleasure to introduce our moderator for today, Ann Seacrest, who will introduce the other panelists. Ann is a registered nurse and an international board-certified lactation consultant. She is the executive director of MilkWorks, a nonprofit community breastfeeding center in Lincoln and Omaha. Each year, MilkWorks provides individualized care to more than 1,500 mothers in eastern Nebraska, and in 2013 was highlighted as a model program by the Centers for Disease Control. Ann has worked in maternal child health for over 30 years. She started when she was 18, I think.
Okay, at least. Less than that, yes.
For over 30 years as a patient advocate, educator, nurse, doula, lobbyist, and lactation consultant. Thank you, Ann, for agreeing to moderate this panel, and I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you, Marcia. It's nice to be here. I'm here today with some incredible members of our community to talk about a very important topic, how we support the mental health of new mothers and the consequences when families do not get the support that they need. As Marcia mentioned, I'm the executive director of MilkWorks, a nonprofit community breastfeeding center in Lincoln, and we became involved in maternal mental health because we continue to identify barriers or challenges that mothers face while breastfeeding. We know that breastfeeding protects against depression due to the hormones that are released, but we also know that maternal depression often results in a shortened duration of breastfeeding. So with support from the Community Health Endowment, we are now routinely screening mothers for depression and gathering data to share with our community. Research shows that postpartum depression, we often refer to it as PPD, or also known as a postpartum mood disorder, is underacknowledged and undertreated. Yet the impact on families and the children involved can be devastating and long-lasting. Mothers who are depressed are less attentive, they have fewer protective behaviors, they interact less often with their children, and they have impaired safety behaviors. They don't use car seats as often. They don't use electric plug protectors as often. Their children experience a higher rate of emotional, behavioral, and developmental concerns. They perform less well in school, and they're more likely to experience depression as adults themselves. Information gathered during an early childhood gathering sponsored by Prosper Lincoln ranked maternal mental health support as a priority need in our community. So what do we know about mood disorders in new mothers? Most mothers, 80%, will experience some minor depression that we call the baby blues after the birth of a baby due to lots of different physical, emotional, lifestyle changes and stressors that are involved with becoming a parent. The baby blues generally resolve with support from family and friends. However, we don't know exactly, but probably 10 to 20% of mothers will experience what we call postpartum depression, or PPD, in the first year after their baby's born. It may manifest as depression or anxiety, and it's generally pervasive. It can interfere with a mother's ability to care for herself, her baby, and it can have a lasting impact. A very small percentage of mothers may actually experience a postpartum psychosis, which may have the horrible consequence of resulting in fatal harm to a mother or her baby if not treated promptly. So who is more prone to PPD? We know that mothers who have a history of depression, anxiety, or trauma, mothers who have a difficult or traumatic birth experience, mothers who lack social support, and especially if they do not have trusting relationships in their life. So what makes PPD especially difficult for a community to get their arms around is that childbirth and becoming a new parent is generally considered a time of celebration and joy. And when a mother has feelings that are contrary to this, she may be embarrassed, she may not be able to even identify what's going on with her, and she may literally just not know what to do with it. Healthcare providers care deeply about new mothers, but we may not feel competent to talk to a mother. She may not share it with us. We may really not know exactly how to help her. So the reality is that there's extensive research that continues to emerge on PPD, and there are options for a community when it comes to providing a range of different types of support or treatment for a mother and her family. And you notice that I say community, I don't just say healthcare providers when it comes to creating an envelope to support mothers and families. So let's take some time to listen to some community members and learn a little bit more about this from their personal experiences. So I want to introduce our panelists, and I'm going to kind of start next to me and go across. I'm going to introduce them briefly, and then I have some questions for them. So Miriam Heider grew up in Aurora, Nebraska, but has lived in Lincoln since 2006. She and her husband have 2 daughters. Miriam has a bachelor's degree in human services and is passionate about social justice and maternal mental health. She's going to share her personal experience with postpartum depression. Mark Colburn is the father of 2 children. His wife experienced postpartum psychosis, followed by depression after the birth of their first child in May 2011. His wife was hospitalized twice for psychosis. When their baby was 3 months old, Mark's wife experienced depression, which was severe for 6 months. Mark and his wife had a second baby 4 months ago, and things are going well so far. Khamisa Abdalla is the Women's Program Manager for the Asian Community and Cultural Center, where she works with elderly refugees, empowers and supports women who are domestic violence survivors, and coordinates the mother-daughter circle. I like to say Khamisa does everything. Originally from Sudan, Khamisa speaks Arabic and Nuba. She is a mother of 8 children. Their family was one of the first Sudanese family that came to Lincoln in 2000. Khamisa received a bachelor's degree in psychology and human services from the College of St. Mary. She's also a community breastfeeding educator. Gena Foster has called Lincoln home for more than 20 years. She earned her Bachelor of Science degree in nursing from Union College in 1999 and taught in their maternal child health program for 7 years. After completing a Master of Science degree as a family practice nurse practitioner at the University of Nebraska Medical Center, Gena practiced women's health care in an obstetric gynecology clinic. In 2015, Gena launched Wholehearted Healthcare, PC, a holistic primary health care clinic where she practices integrative medicine. Gena is board certified in family practice. So I'm going to start with Miriam. Miriam, you're the mother of 2 daughters. I understand that you experienced PPD when your children were born. Did anyone talk to you about postpartum depression before your first baby was born? And what did postpartum depression feel like to you?
Nobody really, I think it was touched on in my midwife, like prenatal appointments, but I don't remember having a long discussion about it. I didn't really experience it with my first daughter. I had the normal baby blues that went away. So when Lucia, my youngest, was born, it was a wonderful birth, and we had a lot of support right after she was born. But then my husband started working nights, and I was home alone with 2 kids. So my PPD experience is a little different because I didn't realize it was PPD until much later because it manifested as anxiety.
Okay.
And that anxiety caused me to be very angry. So I didn't realize that's what it was at first. It took me 9 months to even say to my husband, I think this might be postpartum depression. Okay. And the reason that I discovered it was I was Googling anxiety in mothers and found a website called Postpartum Progress, and it listed all of the different symptoms, and one of them was anxiety and anger. And my bachelor's is in human services, so I know a lot about psychology and counseling, and I had never heard of postpartum depression looking like anxiety. So
when you talked about feeling anger and anxiety, how did that kind of play out in your daily life? What did that feel like when you were taking care of your baby and you were adjusting to being a new mother? What did that look like or feel like?
Yeah, so I bottled up a lot of the anxiety. So then when it just got to be too much, it became anger, and so I would lash out. So I found myself yelling when never before in my parenting experience had I yelled at my children. I found myself getting irrationally angry at the slightest thing that my husband would do, like he would leave a cupboard door open and I would be yelling at him about that. And there was a lot of sort of looking at that from the outside in and saying, what are you doing? This is ridiculous. Why are you yelling and getting so angry over these tiny little things? I also had these anxious sort of worst case scenario thoughts where I would just be, we'd be on a walk and I would think, what if a car comes and hits my baby? Or I'm walking down the stairs holding my baby. What if we fall and I drop my baby? So just not necessarily like ruminating thoughts, but just worst case scenario. Something bad is going to happen to us.
Did the feelings that you have, did they happen every day? What happened when you woke up in the morning and you looked forward to your day taking care of your children?
Yeah, it was, it was different with my husband working nights. He was there in the mornings. So when he was there, I had support. I didn't feel, I maybe had those thoughts, but they weren't so consuming. It was when I was alone that I felt them more, I guess, more strongly, and they were harder to let go of.
Okay. Who did you turn to? I know you said you turned to online sources to help you kind of identify it. Why did you feel like you couldn't turn to anybody else for it?
I am the person in my family and always with my friends that people come to when they're struggling.
Okay.
So it was very difficult for me to admit that I needed help. I also felt a little bit like an imposter because I knew all these things. I knew about psychology and I knew about mental health. I was going to school to be, for pre-counseling basically. So I should be able to handle this on my own. That's what I kept telling myself. I can do this. I can fix it myself.
So what did you do? How did you move out of it? Or what did you do to actually help you to get to a different place with it?
So when my baby was 9 months old, I finally admitted to my husband, I don't feel normal. I don't know what's wrong, but this isn't normal. And, he admitted that he had known, but he didn't want to tell me. Because he knew that I would, knowing my personality, I would just lash out and say, you're crazy.
Right.
I'm totally fine. I
Right.
can do this. So that was the first step, telling him. I told my mother, I told my sisters, so kind of reaching out to family and telling them, I don't feel normal. I don't know what's wrong, but I don't feel good. Some other symptoms were happening. I was really tired. My hair was falling out. It was kind of beyond that normal postpartum hair loss. I couldn't lose weight, even though I was active and I was eating well. Not only I couldn't lose weight, I was putting on weight. And I wasn't sleeping. So finally, when my daughter turned a year, I decided to go to the doctor with all of these symptoms. Okay. So the depression and the anxiety sort of got lumped in with everything else, and my doctor decided to do a thyroid panel and found out that I had hypothyroidism. Okay. So I started taking medication for that, and the depression slowly lessened and lessened and lessened. Okay. So it was really treated medically, I would say, rather than with talk therapy or group therapy or anything like that.
Okay. So what did you learn the most about yourself from going through this?
I learned that mental health is not something that you can solve on your own. Even when you have the knowledge and the skill set, it is really a community effort. It took going to my doctor, it took talking to my family and being open with my family about what I needed. So I learned to ask for help, which was very difficult for me because I'm the one that provides help for people. So that was a very humbling experience. And I learned that it can happen to anybody. So even though I had the best birth possible with my daughter, I had a huge amount of support that I had worked really hard to get before my daughter was born, so I planned for that support. It can still happen. So.
Okay. Thank you, Miriam.
Yeah.
And we're going to have an opportunity to come back to you, too. So, Mark, your wife experienced quite severe postpartum depression. Actually, what we would call postpartum psychosis as well, when your first baby was born. And since then, she's given birth to another baby. Congratulations. So how knowledgeable were you about the fact that all this could happen before you had your first baby?
I would say not very knowledgeable. A little bit on we maybe watched out a little bit for the depression, but the psychosis really blindsided us. We had no idea. I had no idea, and either did my wife really. And she's a RN, and so that was very shocking and alarming.
How did you first see? How did you first know that something was going on?
Well, she had a lot of first signs were not sleeping, which should have been that's a big clue. She would be up at night like vacuuming, cleaning. Those are some of the symptoms with that, and then just really exuberant or excited. had all kinds of ideas like writing books and stuff like that.
Okay.
Just stuff that it wasn't normal. And then later on, as it progressed and got worse, I come home and she was outside in the yard doing gardening, and Esther was inside, and so I knew that something was, yeah.
So the baby was inside and Mom's outside of the
right.
house. So behavior you wouldn't typically see.
Right,
Yes.
and that was at the severe, you know, that was, and so then I knew something was drastically wrong at that point.
So what did you do? What was your reaction to do?
Well, I just went in and talked to her and tried to, you know, calm her down. She was really excited, and towards evening, then I knew that we were in southern Arkansas at the time, and our family is in north central Nebraska.
Okay, so away from your family
Yes,
at the time.
so I decided we better just get in the car and head to family.
Okay, so it felt that severe to you?
Yes.
That you felt you needed
definitely, because
Okay.
prior to that, all those things, I knew something wasn't quite right, but nobody was catching it, I guess.
Were you trying to reach out? I mean, did you have a sense that anybody was paying attention to what was going on, any of your care providers or anything where you were living?
Not so much. They didn't. I mean, it's kind of an unknown. The psychosis is rare.
Right.
And so, no, we weren't.
Were you frightened?
Oh yes, terrified.
Okay.
And so, as I was saying, that evening, then she got violent.
Okay.
And so we got in the car and headed out. We're going to drive to family, and we made it as far as Oklahoma City. And so then she was hospitalized at that point.
So you actually were hospitalized on your way back to Nebraska.
Because she started losing touch with reality.
And so here you are, you have a new baby in the car, you have your wife, you're in a strange city, you're trying to get to help, and you end up in the hospital in Oklahoma. So share a little bit about what happened there.
So we stopped to get gas on the way, and that's prior to being hospitalized, and she started screaming in the parking lot and stuff, and saying that I was like trying to kill her baby and stuff. So then I called my sister, and she said get her to the ER immediately. And so that's what we did, and when she was there, then she started getting violent again. And so they sedated her, but they didn't have a psych facility at that hospital. So they had to transfer her to like a state facility. And another thing that I guess I want to mention is at this time we did not have health insurance. And so that really was a hindrance to getting help from that point on.
Is the lack of health care insurance?
Yes. I didn't realize that you, at that time, you couldn't just go to a facility unless it was connected with an ER. Because they wouldn't accept you.
So how long was she in Oklahoma hospitalized?
About 24 hours.
And
that was the first time that I realized at the ER doctor said she has postpartum psychosis. And so at that point, then I'm like, okay. Because it was...
You at least had a name, you had some identification of what was happening.
What was going
here.
on, right. But before that, I had no idea.
Had you ever heard of postpartum psychosis
No, that was
before?
the first time.
So then, after 24 hours, what happened?
Everybody decided we'd go back to southern Arkansas and try to get some outpatient treatment. Which we ran into a lot of dead ends that way because of our insurance.
So insurance was a barrier there.
Yes, and we went into another ER there, and while she was there, she was quite manic, and so they had to sedate her at that point too. And the hospital was calling around trying to get a facility that would take us. And they finally found one 2.5 hours away. So we rode the ambulance, and when we got there, they said, "Oh, we didn't realize that you didn't have insurance." So that was another dead end. So at that point, family come down.
Okay,
and
so
then-
because I was going to say you're
yeah.
taking care of a newborn baby at this time. At the time.
And I should have backed that up a little bit. Oklahoma, my mom flew into Oklahoma City.
Okay, so your mom
and
came
yes,
down.
so she was
Okay.
with us at that point.
Okay,
Yes. Mhm.
okay, so you had some family
had,
support
yes.
at that point to help you take care of a newborn baby
You're
as
right,
well as figure
right.
out what's going on with your wife. Okay.
So and then so then we had family come down. Her family, her mom and dad come
Okay.
down, and was helping. And she has a sister in Denver, Colorado. And we were, she was, of course, researching on the internet and stuff, and she
Okay.
found somebody out there, a psychotherapist, that knew about this, because down there where people were saying there's no such thing as postpartum psychosis. Even doctors were saying that. So we're hitting a lot of dead ends on that, getting help. And so we just packed up and went to Colorado for 3 months to get some. And then she was hospitalized out there.
Okay.
And so that was like a breath of fresh air, getting into a facility that would actually take her, and it was great, yes.
So let me ask you this. When you came about to have a second baby, what did it feel like looking forward to that second birth, knowing what had happened with your after your first child's birth, and what did you do to prepare for that?
Well, it was definitely scary, but we had a lot more support, and a lot of medical support and therapy, and since then she was on the thyroid medication, so we were working for years trying to help with that, I guess.
So we're hearing a little bit about some coexisting medical conditions that can also aggravate things, and the importance of having that medical perspective as well as that social support that goes along with it. Okay. I'm going to move on, Mark. Thank you so much for sharing that. When you were talking, I was getting goosebumps up my arms from just thinking about going through that as a new father. Khamisa, your family was one of the first Sudanese families to come to Lincoln.
Right.
And as part of your work with the Asian Center, you provide work to mothers who are often new to America. How is their postpartum adjustment impacted by being in a new country that may have different customs and traditions than the country that they grew up in?
Yeah, let me give little ideas about what mean have new baby and Sudanese family. So it's for everybody, I think it's most happiest moments. But for Sudanese family, it comes with a lot of work. So
a lot of work.
Yeah, a lot of work. Mom have to do a lot of preparation for new babies, and she have to follow a lot of serious rules. Like she cannot be by herself all the time. People have to stay with her.
Okay.
When she first have the baby, they have to bury the placenta in front of her doors.
Okay.
And they have to burn incense in the morning, in the mid or noon, and in the evening.
Okay.
And they have to be all the time people around her. She have to eat certain food, and she never work. She have to stay like 40 days, up to 40 days.
40 days.
She just taking care of her babies and herself, and always people be around her. Even she cannot go by herself outside. But this is different here in the United States. People are busy. She can find herself by sitting by herself, taking care of her babies, other children. So this will be too much for her. And when you talk about the mood disorder, that happened in my country. I saw a lot. A lot of women have that happen to them. But it's not about postpartum disorder. They think she touched by evil.
So they think she is touched by evil.
Yes.
That's how it would be defined in Sudan.
Yes. And she never get to the hospital because they think hospital can do nothing about it. It's all about evil thing they have to do, like magic thing, and get to the traditional treatments. And most of the time, women don't like to talk about it because they think they are crazy.
Right.
Since she just showing that she is not normal, she was be dangerous for her newborn, she would be removed from the house, and she be taken to the magic place or to someone who can treat by religious, and she cannot get well because there is no right treatment. Mm-hmm. If she stay there for a year, this will be a problem for her. Maybe her husband will marry another wife to take care of the babies, and really it's messed up. Mm-hmm. I will tell you honestly, I didn't know it's really disease. You can treat it. We thought it's mess, like you've been touched by evil or bad spirit. Right. So that's why maybe most of the time they blame her family. They left her alone, or they didn't take care of her. But we didn't know this is really something can happen to someone, like any sickness can happen. So, but I'm glad now women are more open. If they found themselves didn't act normal or didn't feel normal, they will talk or they can go see their physician. Yes.
But you know, you and I have had many conversations about the fact that women who grow up in one culture and then they come to the United States, and the whole environment can be so different for them, yes, which can just add different issues along with it. What do you find most helpful? Because you work with a lot of women of different ages in your position through the Asian Center. What do you find most helpful for the women that you work with when you see that they're struggling with postpartum adjustment?
I found it's very interesting and important for women to get as group. In Asian Center, we have a lot of group of women come to the program.
A lot of groups, so women coming together with other women.
So we talk about the issues, what we struggle with it here. So most of the time, if we didn't know what that means, so we can invite expert like nurse or someone who can talk about that issues. So women can get ideas how can they get help. It's not like something about traditional or magic. Right. It's here something we can treat it by science or by medical. So that will make easy for them to live. Besides, they are stressed more about being in new country and different culture, and a lot of things is different. It's very hard for them. So.
And you know, it's interesting how Miriam mentioned that she actually went online to help try and figure out what was going on with her. And we know that social media and everything, parents turn a lot to social media to find out information. You know, Mark ended up being in an emergency room in a community he didn't even know, trying to seek help. And Khamisa talks about bringing women together as a way for women to support each other as they learn about postpartum and postpartum adjustment. And we do know that groups have a lot of research behind them in terms of their effectiveness. I'm going to move on to Gena at this point, because we're all going to have an opportunity to come back. You're a nurse practitioner. You've spent years working in women's health in a variety of settings. We actually met each other first at working postpartum in the hospital, okay? You have a very special interest in supporting mothers as they adjust to motherhood. How do you help a mother who comes to you with postpartum depression?
That's a big question, and I knew you were going to ask it too. It's very personalized, right? These experiences are not all the same. Your background is different. So it's getting connected. The elements are, there's some essential elements that are there. You need connection, trusting relationships, and access to care, you know, really, you know, getting the right care that you need at that time. Ending up in an ER where they say there's no postpartum psychosis, that's devastating. I mean, it's a lot to go through. So it's a combination of things, and for my clients specifically, I'm looking to create a tribe of healers really around them. And I don't look at it that it's a an evilness, of course, but from the different aspects of, do they need more trusting relationships in their lives? Are they able to speak up for themselves? Do they need some, like a support therapist to help them with cognitive behavior therapy so they can advocate for what it is they feel and they need inside of them? Do they need medication? You know, there's times that, like, going on to a psych referral would be very appropriate to have that combination of things. But medicine alone doesn't take away the feelings that you have, right? It doesn't take away those feelings. So it's not just about the physical that's going on inside of them, it's about emotions. So it's finding that right combination for each person. So it's very, very, very individualized.
You know, when you think about it, Gena, depression, anxiety, mood disorders, anybody can experience that.
Right.
And we oftentimes talk about them being a little epidemic in our culture right now.
Right.
But when you have a baby involved in this situation, so you've got a mother who is attempting to take care of her baby because she knows that's what her role is, and then you layer the depression and anxiety on top of it. What kind of difficulties does that create?
A lot. A lot, because everything comes from our sense of self, who we are in the world, comes from like how we've attached to the world, and that comes from a trusting relationship from a care provider. It takes one person. You have to have that one person. So if, like, you know, in a setting where you grow up with a mom who is struggling with depression, we know that attachment, one of the elements of healthy attachment is that attunement, where I'm really noticing you, I'm checking you, what's going on with, you know, Sarah or Sally, who's across from you, that child, and really paying attention to you deeply, emotionally, and what you're feeling. And so if you're depressed, I mean, there's no shame on that mother. If you're struggling either anxiety-wise or depression, either one, you lose that ability, right? I can't really attune to what's going on with Khamisa if I'm super anxious and upset about what's going on inside of me. And so it has a huge ripple effect for that child then.
So what are some of the actual really different specific things that you will help a mom plan or help a mom to do as she's moving through this process of coping on a daily basis with trying to be a mother and taking care of her baby, and also trying to move through what's going on?
Right. I think it's crucial to involve the support person. So either a dad or a mom or an aunt or someone who is connected and invested in that committed relationship. Having that just transparency of, like, I'm really struggling, it's freeing, instead of I'm going in the closet and crying every night. Or I'm laying next to my husband crying and there's no connection there. So making sure that that's open and safe, so that there's no judgment and shame coming from that partner. So there's a lot of role modeling, teaching that language to receive and accept emotions from someone who's struggling too, because it might be hard for that partner to accept the other person's feelings as well. Getting them, helping them, let me step back. One of the things that you lose when you are depressed is a sense of self. You can have a fractured sense of self, and that's common postpartum. You can't remember, like, body image stuff, right? How many of you have, like, whoa, this is not me. This isn't the body I had. Or you conceptualize yourself at a certain age, and then, you know, you're not connected to what your shape is at that time. So lots of body image things, and helping people regain what it is to really be me. And it's different for each person, but there are some elements that are crucial. You know, you have to understand that that's what you're articulating, that's what you've lost. And then can you identify? So working on awareness, both body awareness, and a lot of awareness of emotions. validating them. There's a lot of negative self-talk that happens, right, with mood disorders. Like Miriam was sharing of like, I can be angry. I mean, I don't yell at people, right? I don't yell at people. I'm not that mother. I don't yell at my kids. We all have that capacity to yell at our kids. It doesn't mean we hate them. It means that what's going on inside of us. So allowing that, those emotions, one, what they are, recognizing, validating them, and then letting them come back out with compassion, that's where you're at right now, and that's okay.
So we know a little bit that different moms are going to need different things as they go through this. Obviously reaching out to a healthcare provider, as long as there's not a barrier with insurance, to actually have a medical checkup to make sure there isn't something else, a vitamin deficiency,
Right.
a thyroid deficiency, whatever else could be going on.
Right.
We also know that talk therapy is something that oftentimes moms will turn to. We know that psychiatrists can play a part because oftentimes there is prescribing of medications that might be involved. We know mothers groups help.
Right.
Fitness oftentimes.
Exercise,
Yoga has,
movement.
yoga and some meditation and other different types of just walking, things like that can oftentimes help with that. If I asked each of you what you feel that our community could do to provide better support for a mom and for families, what would you say that would be? And or what have we not mentioned here that you want to mention before we open it up to questions? So Miriam, can you think of a way our community could provide better support? And you might talk a little bit about the Mother Women course that that is going on in our community.
I think making mental health interventions more accessible.
Okay.
So personally, when I was going through this, I went to my doctor because my insurance would cover it. I
Right.
didn't go to a therapist because my insurance would not cover
Right,
it.
okay.
Even though I know the power of therapy, and I know its importance in dealing with depression, I knew we wouldn't be able to afford it. So I think that is really important, whether that's talk therapy or groups like you mentioned, the Mother Woman group, which is not a replacement for therapy, but is an accessible, free way for women to come together to speak their truth, to share about their transition to motherhood and their struggles, and to be heard. I think giving women the space to be heard and not necessarily to be fixed is really important.
Right.
Sometimes a mom just needs somebody to listen to them. And hear them without saying, well, you should do this, or you should try this, or why don't you do this, or you could do this. I think you're meeting with a lot of people after your baby is born, but there's a transition that happens when you're pregnant to when you give birth. The focus is really on the mother during the prenatal time, and once that baby's born, everybody is there to hold the baby. They're there to buy clothes for the baby, they want to take the baby for walks, but the mother's forgotten. And so I think giving mom a chance to be heard and to be seen is really important.
Okay. Mark, what would you say? If you could wave your magic wand and make something happen in our community that would support new families, what would you say?
Well, I say awareness, just like this, is
Yeah.
good, because, like I said, there's a lot of people that have never heard of some of these issues that we're talking about, psychosis and postpartum depression. So that, and like you were saying, talk therapy, exercise, all those things are so important. And the mental stuff is so hard to understand, I guess, because I guess, and that comes back to the awareness. If you break an arm, a lot of people can sympathize with you with the broken arm. Oh yeah, you know. But if you have something like depression, not very many people, you know, so that having that group, like Miriam was saying, where you can, you know, just share things and talk about stuff, that would, I think that would be beneficial.
And it's really important to know that our community has been touched many times by very severe postpartum psychosis. My first memory of it was back in the 1980s, and there was a new mother employed in Lincoln, very active in our community, who drowned her baby in the kitchen sink when her baby was a month old. And she had sought help, and nobody recognized that that's what it was. So it is something that can, I mean, we can't underestimate how severe this can be, both in our own community as well as around the country. Khamisa, what would you like to see different in our community?
I really like the community to be more educated, especially for refugees or people come new to United States, because this is something is new and they struggle with a lot of stuff also. And also cannot be ashamed about talking about it. It's
not being ashamed, talking about it.
Because I saw for my community, a lot of people have bad ideas or wrong ideas about science therapy or talking about your own feeling.
Right.
It's a shame people like to keep it, even they are struggle a lot. So it's nothing, you can get more educated about this, you can be open, not shame. And also I need to see the men in my community educate about those stuff, because in my community, when most of tribes do that, when women have a baby, the men have to stay away, even cannot step in the room until 40 days. So he cannot know what is going on with his child or his wife. So I know it's something hard to change, but here I think is she needs support.
So including partners and helping partners know, you know, what is going on, so they can help, whether it just be identifying or knowing where to turn. Gena, what would you say?
Well, a couple things. Can I touch on a couple of
Yeah,
little
absolutely.
points too? Okay, so one, I heard this panel, and it's something that I believe as well, say is that it can happen to anyone. Right? Your degree does not protect you. Your social status does not protect you from these symptoms, okay? So be more transparent about what's actually happening in the community and meeting it with that grace and compassion, not shaming it, recognizing that it's a big transition for everyone. I mean, I was thinking about the other day, adolescence is a huge transition, right? We all got that figured out, right? This is the same kind of thing. Yeah, we're gonna make it through it, but it's a big transition to become a parent. The sense of responsibility, you know, there's lots of different emotions that come along with it. Besides the sleep deprivation and the change in hormones and everything else, there's a lot that's happening self-concept-wise. There are a lot of good resources in this town. There are. It's getting connected to them. I think that is hard for women. So in that way, I think that moms groups are really important because they can spread the word, and they're, you know, you can help each other socially as well. Screening, I think, as we know, like, because it can happen to everyone, but as we know, like, more and more awareness around, you know, there are risk factors definitely to a depressive episode or a psychotic episode, and the anxiety disorders. There's a lot of unawareness or lack of awareness that is not there for anxiety disorders postpartum, and really holding space like this, you know, and spreading the word that that's out there, making sure that people really know. I know Mark shared that his wife is a nurse, and she hadn't learned about that. I honestly, I didn't learn about postpartum anxiety disorders in undergraduate school either. And I knew about, yeah, you could become more concerned about things, but the obsessive compulsive thoughts or ruminating thoughts or hypervigilance, those kind of variables, or mood transitions or alterations were not communicated. So I think that is very important, because honestly what I see the most is there's definitely a strong combination, but anxiety is a little bit higher and it's kind of masking the depression.
Right.
So allowing people access and screening for that. As far as when to do screening, I think this conversation happens way before.
Right.
Way before.
And the screening that we're talking about, which many of you may be aware of, it's called the Edinburgh screening. It's not a diagnostic tool. It's a 10-question screening tool. And it's one of the things that as we started to investigate around in the community to find out, well, are moms being routinely screened during while they're pregnant? Are they being screened on a regular basis after their baby's born? And that's part of the work that we're doing with a grant from actually from the Community Health Endowment, as well as the Viking Foundation and Keno Human Services Fund, is to actually do some regular screening throughout that first year with moms, and then also have something that, you know, one of the reasons we haven't always routinely screened is, what do you do if you get a high score on a mom? What do you do? So one of the things that MilkWorks has done is put together a list of resources in the community as to where can we refer moms to get some help, even though we know there's going to be barriers accessing that at times, which you've mentioned about, due to health insurance status. Oftentimes it's not just awareness. But that's what this screening is all about. It's just kind of a starting point where a mom can screen herself actually, and take the tool herself. A dad could encourage a mom to take the screening tool. And then it's accessing the resources that are available in the community. But that's what the screening tool that we're talking about is. Yeah. You know, I would like to mention too that another issue in our culture is moms returning to work at a very early age. As we all know, we are a country that has pretty much the worst maternity leave policies in the world. And we see mothers returning to work at when their baby is 2 weeks old. I remember having a student come down to MilkWorks. Her baby was 4 weeks old. She had a cesarean, and she was back traveling down to Lincoln for school. And it was like she was not feeling well from every different direction. Those are some of the stressors that we put on women, of poor access to care, and then also possibly returning into the workforce very early. Isolation, as we've talked about, particularly when they're away from their family or from their home culture. So there's a lot of things that are kind of going on with that kind of create this environment that is really difficult. We're kind of at a point where we're really ready to open up to questions. I'm going to kind of say, is there anything else you want to say before we open up to questions? Otherwise, then I'm going to kind of let you direct questions towards our panel. Marcia?
Hi there. I don't really have a question, and this is not on.
It is on.
Is it? Oh, okay. Hi, I'm Andrea, and I'm with Women's Health Initiatives from DHHS, and I wanted to mention screening tools around perinatal depression, which is the term we use, because that encompasses even prior to getting pregnant, and then during pregnancy, and then after pregnancy. And one of the things DHHS has worked on is in that screening tool aspect is that a lot of times women, if you've had a very textbook easy pregnancy or delivery, you often don't go and see your provider until about 6 weeks after you had that baby. The one person you do go and see is your pediatrician within, I think, 48 hours. And so one of the things that we've done is encourage pediatricians to screen moms.
Yes.
And I myself have had postpartum depression with both my children. And in fact, when I had my daughter, my second child, I was in the like I was 24 hours still at the hospital when the depression just kicked in. It was like somebody took a switch and flipped it on. And because of my position professionally, I immediately, told every single person, including my neighbors, my mother. I went to the pediatrician. They screened me without even knowing, my own professional history. My pediatrician screened me. My pediatrician got me in to see a therapist within 24 hours of my daughter having her first pediatrician visit. So one of the, I think, a very, very important tool, and I think that providers in the community and those of us who work in the community need to encourage and continue to get pediatricians involved in the screening effort. I know my pediatrician did, but I don't know about every pediatrician, and obviously throughout the state. And then the pediatrician's office is who made the appointment for me.
Right.
So that is something that's a really important screening tool because, like I said, a lot of times women don't get in to see their gyno until like 6 weeks after. And so I think that I don't know how you reach every pediatrician other than through email or the mail or credentialing or whatever, but so thank you.
They are very important members of the community team when it comes to, even though we think of them taking care of babies, they really help take care of parents too in that period. I'd like to just ask how many of you, there's a number of women in this group, how many of you would say that you experienced some postpartum depression? Yeah, okay. One comment that we oftentimes will say to moms too, that I've done as a care provider, is always to say, if you have any concerns about yourself, put your baby in a safe place and call someone. And if they don't listen to you, call another person. And so that's a very key message. We've got a question right back here.
Can I just comment while we're transitioning?
Yes.
I do think in this community, the pediatricians are really in tune with this and they're on board.
Yep.
I think, there's a little more to do there, I'm sure, but my experience has been that they do screen well, and I know working in a gynecology clinic, they contacted me right away. I got a fax that same day with the Edinburgh screening tool if anything was abnormal. So
Yeah,
Yeah,
well, we
good
always
follow-up.
first think about the entire state and rural
Right,
communities and
right.
things like
I
that,
agree.
too. So
I
it's,
agree.
you know.
But I think there is some good work being done here.
I know when we think of postpartum depression, what comes to mind is immediately after. Without just own experience, I'm a mental health professional, also dealing with clients that have come into our agency. What I don't know, and I don't know how much information or education is out there on this, is the longer onset, because I know the research I did said that it could be up to a year, which was surprising to me, especially when I was going through some of my own stuff, going, okay, should be over this by now. And
Right.
some women come in and start asking some of those questions. Well, they have a 6-month-old at home and they're still depressed, and they don't associate that with postpartum. So I want to know what's being done to get that information out there, because I think you get into that, I should be happy, I should be past this. I mean, right after the baby, hormones change, all that, it makes a little more sense. Longer.
When the research that has followed women through the first year, and that's what we're at MilkWorks, our screening is going to go every 3 months throughout the first year. Because what they found is that there's a jump in postpartum depression around 6 months of age with the baby, and that's not being caught. Because exactly because of what you're saying, is we're thinking this is something that happens in the first few weeks after a baby's born and it resolves and goes away, but that it oftentimes can surge in the middle. I see you shaking your head back there. Would you like to comment on that a little bit more too?
Hi, Ann.
Hi.
I'm Marcia Dvorak, and I've been a postpartum doula as well as a birth doula, and I'm a CLC, and I'm one of the original founders of MilkWorks. But how I got into education was that I went through a silent postpartum depression at 6 months, and it was a very quiet thing. I ended up going to a workshop with Nancy Weiner Cohen, and learned there in Colorado what I'd been going through. So when I was preparing for my next pregnancy, I contacted Ann to doula us before we were called doulas. I've been supporting postpartum families. However, I can't do more than one at a time. Well, or I've done several at a time, but my issue is in the education of families as well as professionals. When I was training for DONA International, training birth doulas, we also brought in Jackie Kelleher to train postpartum doulas years ago. I've been in close contact with her, and hopefully maybe we can bring her back in. It's another avenue of support, but one more thing is it may be the partner who has postpartum depression, and it's not identified. The other thing is what isn't talked about much and should be is a previous history of sexual abuse, and that's a very, very hot topic, but a very silent one. So my question for you is, there's not a question. I'm thrilled about this. However, there's a lot of avenues that I'll discuss with you later. Thank you, you guys. This is awesome.
I think you touched on it, that community support is really crucial. And I think that that's one of the things that we like, or I like so much, is that peer-to-peer group structure is really helpful for mothers. There's lots of good literature. The research is there to support it. Plus, it's helpful because it's catching, right? You have this sustainable group that you're with for sometimes years at a time. And so you notice when those things are coming up. So the postpartum depression, 6-9 months later, that's a work environment a healthy environment that can support that.
Hello, everybody. So thank you for doing this. This is an amazing information here and sharing your stories. My name is Johanna, and I work with the home visitation program with the Lincoln Lancaster County Health Department. And my experience working with postpartum mother with depression is, like you mentioned, it is for the Latino community is the taboo. We don't want to be associated with nobody who has mental health. Mental health is a very hard topic. And one of the obstacles that I think we challenge is to make sure this is something that happened. They need to understand this is really happened to anybody. It doesn't matter your background, where you're coming from, your social statuses. And we know that. So what I have doing is trying to educate and give it information and the confidence to my client to be open with me. Because unfortunately, with many other my mothers that I work with, they don't have any insurance. So looking for help is basically none. And it is what it is, and we have to work with what we have. So I'd love to hear more about the support group that Khamisa is working, because that will give me an idea to probably work with those families and provide the support, and they can share a story with each other. The best support that comes for your friend, right?
So Khamisa, would you, in response to this a little bit, would you talk about how you bring your moms together? Because you don't necessarily say, let's get together and talk about postpartum depression. In other words, you have a sewing group.
Yes, this is like trigger a lot of women. You know, women like sewing. So they come for sewing classes, but from that sewing classes we can do other groups. Like we have mental health group, we have training, teaching women about breastfeeding group. They will come with a lot of stuff they needed. Just having women in group, you can find a lot of topic you can talk about it. So I think you have to find something like for DVD, we use sewing class to bring women so we can teach them about financial abuse or whatever abuse. So it's a good, I like it.
Thank you. And another observation that I would like, and something that I would like to share with you guys, is that the lack, the language is a barrier, And the lack of communication in those cases is crucial. So one of the problems that we are facing is with the mental health is the lack of professional speaking other languages.
Right.
Because the study has shown that people express themselves different in each language. And I had that as an experience, to be bilingual. You know, I try to express something, I think in Spanish,
Right.
try to make it to say it in English, and things come totally different. So when we have to use a very qualified interpreters for doing this kind of job, because it's very delicate, it's very important, and any word can mess up and can change the whole meaning of the sentence. So maybe when you guys professionals go to a college, encourage those people that are bilingual to become mental health professional, because that will help. Also, that open that conversation, because if we speak the same language, that will make sometimes that make things easier. So that's just an observation, and it's something that I did a little bit of research a while back, and I found out that the lack of professionals speaking different languages make a big, big difference. But thank you so much for the job that you are doing.
Yeah.
We really appreciate it.
Great.
And I know you have asked what we can do as a community, and I know as a community, really, in our state, we need to expand Medicaid.
Yeah.
It's heartbreaking when you hear that you couldn't get your wife's care because she had no insurance. So we have got to expand Medicaid. Thank you.
So another support program that Khamisa's been involved with, and MilkWorks has been involved with for several years, with support from the Community Health Endowment and some other organizations, has been our culturally diverse community breastfeeding educators in the community. And that is kind of a great opportunity or a great place for us to talk more too about the unique needs that mothers have postpartum mental health wise. So what we do is we offer a 15-hour course for mothers from all different cultures to come together and to talk about breastfeeding and to learn about breastfeeding, with a goal that they can really then talk to other mothers who look like them, who talk like them, who go to the same churches, live in the same neighborhoods, in a kind of educational support capacity to support them with breastfeeding, because breastfeeding and postpartum depression are closely kind of intertwined, because the hormones involved in breastfeeding actually protect against postpartum depression. But we also know when a mom has depression, it tends to interrupt or hurt her breastfeeding process with her baby. And you can kind of understand that from what we've talked about. If you're anxious, if you're angry, if you're manic, that's going to be really hard to take care of your baby and tune in with your baby. But the culturally diverse community breastfeeding educators have kind of this wonderful way of just being there where moms are in our community and finding ways in which they can talk to breastfeeding and all kinds of issues related with that. And we'll be offering actually another course this spring. For women, it's grant supported, so we actually pay the community breastfeeding educators, the women, to attend the course, and then we offer ongoing kind of times to get together and share for continuing education throughout the year. So please let me know if any of you know of anyone who would like to partake in that project as part of it, because it's another way that we can reach out to women in their own language, because it's really the best way that it happens, is when women can talk to somebody that looks like them and sounds like them and understands a little bit more. And we are really made better as a community by all of that cultural diversity. We really are. All of the research really points that whether you're an organization, whether you're a community, whatever, that diversity of having different ways that people look at things and different ways that people have learned, and just as we learn from other cultures where women are taken care of a lot better after giving birth than they are in our culture, we need to learn to adapt to some of their ways as we help families move through the postpartum period. So. Other questions out there, or yes?
Yes. Mark is my son, and Our families went through this whole thing together. But one thing I'd like to mention, that after she had the psychoses, and that was kind of with medication kind of being taken care of, but she went into this severe depression for months. And so we dealt with both of those issues.
Tell us a little bit more. Share your story a little bit more about what that felt like to watch your son going through this, to watch your daughter-in-law, your grandchild.
Well, I would say it's probably the toughest experience in my life. And we were involved off and on. I flew to Oklahoma City and went with him. Then we went to Denver, and we got into a hospital there, and they had resources, I don't know just how, that helped pay the expenses, but we also had money and practically drained us. Because it takes a lot of money to get a psychiatrist at $275 an hour, and we had a good psychotherapist, and she also helped Mark. And then after they moved back to Missouri, or to Arkansas, she found a psychiatrist in Louisiana, just over the border there, that worked with Becky, and so it's very expensive. Mark didn't work for months, and I didn't either, so we were all kind of basket cases. But anyway, it worked out. But we were all a little anxious with this last baby. But one thing that she did on her, she was a psychiatric nurse.
So look at this. I mean,
but she knew the side effects of the drugs she was taking. And she was very reluctant to take some of those because they were terrible side effects. So you didn't know what was what, whether it was the psychosis or the depression, or whether it was the side effects of the drugs. So that was kind of hard too. And they are on a good, healthy diet. And she does take what is it that she takes?
We did the placental encapsulation, which I think has really made a difference this time. So I would like to mention that too.
Do you want to explain what placental encapsulation is?
It's the placenta, the afterbirth, is put into a capsule form, and then she's taken that. And all animals eat their afterbirth except humans. I mean, so. To get there's a hormone imbalance after childbirth, and that helps to get that back in balance. I know it sounds crazy, but it really does. I think it really does.
There's not a lot of scientific research behind it because it's not very profitable.
Right.
Obviously. But
yeah, and then some of it's in a tincture form. Yeah.
The lady come to the hospital. That's her business, is doing this, and she was from Lincoln, wasn't she? And she come to the hospital and made a smoothie for her out of some of the raw afterbirth. And of course Becky was looking forward to doing that because she had researched that and wanted to do that.
So you'd done a lot of research before the second birth to help prepare. Had you had an experience with anyone you knew or anything with postpartum depression before this happened?
This was just a shock.
Just a shock
to me. Yeah. And I don't. They say the mother's mother is the best one to deal with it, because there was times when I didn't know. I just was ready to throw up my hands. But then they moved back to Nebraska to a dairy farm, and she finished recovering there some. And so she was with her mother there, and she was more patient, than I was. And I was one that wanted to just take over, and the counselor from Colorado said, don't separate her from her baby.
Okay.
She has to stay connected, make sure, and then we were mixing up a special formula, and she said she needs to do that for the baby, because that was the hardest thing for her, was to give up nursing.
Was to give up nursing as
She
part of
just,
it.
And she saved her breast milk for all the while she was in the hospital, and they thought, well, we were taking it home, feeding it to the baby, but we were just putting it in the freezer because she just couldn't give up that breastfeeding or what was connected to it.
And that's what we know, that oftentimes that weaning that comes along with it then aggravates the postpartum depression more. So it is all very, very intertwined as part of that. I think we've got a couple.
Hi, I'm Valerie. I work with the Bryan Foundation. I'm not a healthcare professional, but I work very closely with the Women and Children's Tower and also in our mental health department. And what is really challenging for normal deliveries is the very short stay that they have in the hospital. And so I hear constantly from our nurses, we try to do the screenings, we try to get to know the situations that our mothers are in, but you can't necessarily capture all of that in that very short stay now. Where we've really changed our focus, so knowing these resources, first of all, phenomenal. So wonderful that you're putting these all together for us. Where we've really noticed is our NICU, our neonatal intensive care. And when you have anywhere between 400 and 500 babies a year in our NICU, and they're staying for significant amounts of time, that's where we've really been trying to focus on the education piece. And so now our NICU nurses are not only taking care of these preemies, but it's also the education of what's going on with your baby. And the more we went through a COPE program, COPE for Hope, and it's an educational packet working with mothers and fathers, so that it's not the don't touch your baby, don't do this, you can't do that. It's more of a here's why overstimulation for this 1 to 2 pound baby needs to be postponed for later. And so working with them and then tying in with mental health services for those weeks or months seem to have a stronger, parents are more apt to seek that help while their little one is being cared for. And right now, PTSD, they've been studying for 5 years with these preemie parents is very real. And those mental health situations come back again when your baby's going to kindergarten, and those milestone pieces. So
which I'm so glad you brought up the whole, we are a culture that we have the ability now to protect and save babies who are born at a very early age, which we didn't 50 years ago. But that brings with it also basically a lot of trauma that can go along with it because of the prolonged hospitalizations, the interruption of work, everything that kind of goes along with it. So that's a whole other area that's kind of contributing to what moms are going through, moms and dads are going through. So we've got just a couple minutes left. I was going to see if anybody on the panel wanted to check in if we had anything any kind of final comments. Is there anything that any of you would kind of like to just add to this discussion that you feel hasn't been touched upon or that really touched you in terms of something else that you would like to add?
I would encourage everybody that has mothers in their life to really check in with them. There's a stigma about mental health, and I think it's a double stigma with maternal mental health. It's supposed to be the most joyous part of your life. So, you just you ask those questions, you frame your discussions about how happy are you? Are you just totally blissed out? And, for some moms, that's not what's happening. And so don't be afraid to reach out to those moms. Definitely don't diagnose them with postpartum depression. That's not our job. But as a friend, as a sister, as an aunt, if you see a mom struggling, don't be afraid to say something. Ask them the hard questions about how they're really doing. And even if they appear to be all put together, it's very easy to hide if you're struggling. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
Mark, what would you add?
Well, you said the wave the magic wand, and I would guess it would get rid of the stigma towards the mental issues and stuff in the postpartum and more awareness too.
It touches many, many, many lives.
Yes, and
Yes.
like we were hearing, it doesn't matter what walk of life you are.
Right.
It can happen to anybody, yeah.
Thank you. And thanks for bringing your mom. Okay. Khamisa.
Yeah, I think one thing I need to say, if you saw pregnant women from the Sudanese community or other culture, encourage them to have, I think there is some nurse who go and visit them when they have
Yes.
a baby. I
yes.
think this will be good.
We have some great support programs through Healthy Families America, the different home visitation programs. Cedars is involved, Lancaster County Health Department, that have programs that will connect and provide more support to parents. And a lot of them do not have a lot of requirements to get into them, but they provide home visitation, somebody in the community that helps provide a little bit connection for them.
I would say, my big passion is normalizing this, that it's a big transition for everyone.
Right.
Nobody's left out. It's just hard. And it doesn't mean that it's not beautiful, but there are some really, really big changes that happen when you become a new parent. In our culture, we need that network of people around us. Solomon and Siegel, they're well-known authors. They mentioned that one of the things I love that they mention is that mental health mental health takes place amongst multiple skulls, which really goes back to, it's very powerful for it takes a village, takes a tribe, those concepts of we need each other for connection in order to make this a good transition for people. So.
You guys have done a beautiful job, and you have all done a beautiful job too with contributing and sharing.